According to a now popular study from Harvard University, the greatest predictor of longevity and life satisfaction, what really makes a good life, is relationships. But when you consider that the divorce rates, at least in the US, are around 50%, it suggests that a relationship, a really good relationship, is not just going to happen to you. It seems that it's something we need to cultivate. So if we ask ourselves the question, how do we live the best life possible? If we have an intimate partner, how do we make sure that this relationship is a really good relationship? To answer this question, in episode 52 of the Ikario podcast, Shane and I are joined by Cheri Timko. Cheri is a couples relationship coach. She teaches couples to use straightforward relationship habits so they can build their relationship even while focused on other things. She's been happily married for 20 years. She's also a veteran psychotherapist and a mother to 3 teenage daughters. This is an excellent conversation, one that Shane and I really enjoyed. And the idea of building relationships through habits, things that you do day in, day out, sounded really practical to us. So we got her on the show just to unpack that. So if you're interested, if you really want to create great relationships in your life, then this episode is for you. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the episode.
All right, Cheri, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, I think this is going to be good. And let's dive right in. I mean, relationships are obviously one of the things that have such a deep impact on life quality. I sometimes wonder how much of both, joy and human misery basically comes back to relationships. And so it seems very, very worthwhile to figure out how to do this well. And you're the right person to talk to. So I just love to, we're just going to pick your brain on this, right? Just in the context of what can we learn about relationships in this context of our goal is human thriving, right? Everybody wants to be happy and thriving and be at their best. And what can we learn from you when it comes to the relationship part of that equation? So to get started, I'd love to know, can you tell us a bit, like, who is the typical person that you work with, and what are the challenges that they come, what are the problems they come to you with?
I have been trying to solve a problem for the past 10 years. And so I think I might have gotten it. I am a psychotherapist by training. I've been doing that for many years. And I get couples who come in who are in crisis. And it's one of the worst things that they ever could have imagined has just happened in their relationship. And I've gotten into the habit that at the end of therapy, when their relationship is functioning well and they've repaired the damage to the relationship, I've gotten into the habit of asking them, what could I have said or what could I have done to get you in the room 6 months or 2 years before this happened? Now, the reason I haven't been able to solve this is because most people say there probably wasn't anything. Now, what I'm doing now, I've just done a pivot to do coaching, and that is the question that is central to what I'm doing. So when I work with people now, what I'm trying to do is break through that complacency, that we're fine. That's what people always say, we're fine. We're fine. We have a good relationship. And then I ask them, okay, but how often do you feel lonely? Or how often do you feel disconnected or like you guys are just roommates? And that's when that fine kind of falls apart. And so that is what I am trying to create right now, is that solution to, hey, fine's fine, fine's whatever, but let's not settle for fine. Like, why shouldn't you have an extraordinary relationship? And in fact, most of us can have an extraordinary relationship, and it doesn't even take that much work, especially if you start out at fine.
Yeah, I really love that. And I think this is, I mean, I see this in other areas of life just the same, where I think this is we are strangely complacent. I think that's strangely common in our culture, where exactly like you say, your relationship, yeah, it's fine, I guess. And only when it gets really bad, then you go, okay, I guess I need therapy or something. And how many of us are doing that in how many areas of our lives? You know, it's like, what's your health like? It's fine, I'm fine. Until you have a heart attack or something, right? And then you're like, oh, maybe I should do something about this.
Right.
And exactly like you say, let's not settle for fine. Let's figure out how to get beyond. And I think it's also something where, you know, our whole idea of like um, health and well-being is like so pathology focused, right? It's like, well, when something breaks, let's fix it. When something's really severely wrong, let's fix it and get you back to like fine, essentially. I think it's such a worthwhile question to ask, and I love the way you formulated this. Is like, no, why not extraordinary? Like, let's figure out how to get from fine to great, and not wait for the disaster to happen. So great,
Yeah.
I'm already riveted.
I'm on that. I get it, because for me, I've always kind of thought that this is something that, you know, basically. So the crux of it is, I grew up. I spent a lot of time in pubs growing up, right? And I listened to the way it's mostly the guys who finish work and then before going home, they'd sprint to the pub to get a few drinks in before having to go home. And the narrative that I often perceived growing up in pubs was just like they didn't want to go home. Or it was like that their relationship was, oh, Jesus Christ, I've got to go home to the wife, and they're all making fun of each other. Or, oh, he's got to go, his missus is coming to get him, and stuff like that. And the narrative is that a relationship, or like being married or something, is just horrible. That's like kind of what I perceived, is that they were doing it almost like they didn't really want to be and stuff like that. And it's something that I always just, growing up, I always just kind of thought, is that normal? Is it normal that you're in a relationship that feels more like a prison? That you need to go to the pub for 3 hours a day in order to avoid. It just never seemed to make sense to me. And I always thought as well, surely this settling for something that if they worked on it like consciously, surely it could be better. Not perfect, obviously, but surely better than that.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
should be better than that. There are so many benefits of having a great relationship. One of them that cracks me up every time I hear it is you get a more health benefits from having a great relationship than you do from going to the gym on a regular workout schedule. So, like, I hate going to the gym. I'll just work on my relationship. Like, seriously.
So let's say that, you know, and I hope that the ikario audience is on board with this idea of let's not wait for the disaster. Let's improve the relationship right now. So let's say you have an audience of people who are on board with this, right? You're talking to the people who are 6 months to 2 years before the big breakdown. Where to start? What do we do to improve our relationship from here?
All right. There are 3 systems that have to work well in order for you to have a good relationship. The first is you need to have good relationship habits. The second is you need to have a way to work through problems. And the third is you need a way to clean up messes when they happen, because messes are inevitable. So I'll walk through each of them because it'll make more sense. So a relationship habit is something that happens on a daily basis that allows you to connect with your partner. It's usually something very small. And the more of those that you have sprinkled through your day, the more it anchors your relationship and keeps it secure and lets it kind of run in the background. When you have something that's a habit, you don't have to think about it every day. You don't have to plan for it. It just happens because it's part of who you are as a couple and what you do. Um, the second is a way to work through problems. So when couples function really well, each of them is able to bring up a problem and they can work that problem through until they come up with a solution. Now, not my solution or your solution. Sometimes it will be, but a solution that you can both get behind and support. So sometimes that does mean you have to lay down your solution and look at what other options there are out there so that neither one of you walk away feeling like you lost that or you gave up too much of what's important to you. And that third system is that you can't be close to someone without making some sort of a mess, hurting their feelings, disappointing them, um, just being irritable with each other. And so having different ways of making repairs as you go through life means that you don't get to that really big crisis because you're cleaning up things before they become um, big disappointments or start to build up into resentment or bitterness. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that you're not going to have a big crisis. Most couples have some sort of big crisis. But if you're cleaning things up as you go, you don't end up at that big crisis and not have the tools to to know how to clean that up. So those are the three systems. And if you get those three systems working well, there's not any reason why you can't have an actually really great relationship.
That's okay. Let's dig into that. I think that sounds very interesting. I will ask for a bit more clarification on the difference between the problem solving and the messes. But I think let's start with the first one with the habits, where like can you give an example? So obviously it makes sense, right? Most human behavior is habitual. So that's like in a way, just like a lot of your life quality is determined by your habits that you don't really think about. It makes sense that applies to a relationship too, right? You can have relationship habits that makes both of you feel great. You can have relationship habits that makes both of you feel terrible, and so that makes sense that that's a place to start, right? Can you maybe give an example of what you like typically see in the form of bad relationship habits that need fixing or good relationship habits that lead to thriving in a relationship?
All right. So the most common bad habit is just to not do anything. One of the mistakes that couples make is that they do the nice things for each other when they feel it. So when they feel loving and they feel kind, then they do something nice for their partner. And of course, I want you to do that. That makes sense that you would do that. But your relationship needs you to do those things when you're not in sync. It needs it more. And so if you only do those things when you feel like it, there's going to be a lot of time when you don't feel like it, where you're busy, you're distracted, where you're irritated, frustrated. And so you just skip those things. So the idea of the relationship habit, so it's really individualized based on the couple. You're looking for the habits that are easy for you and that matter the most to both of you. And they can be these tiny little things. It can be saying good morning. It can be texting at the end of your day. It can be having coffee together at some point. It can be eating a meal together, having an end of the night ritual. Bringing your partner coffee in the morning can be your relationship habit. Now, the way this goes is you pick your thing. So let's just say it's coffee in the morning. That's just the thing that you do, the thing that the two of you do. One of you brings the other coffee. If you do it every day, it doesn't mean that every day is going to be this spectacular connecting point. Okay. Some days it's going to be like, here's your coffee. Like, because we don't always have that energy. But some of those days can be, hey, here's your coffee. What's your day look like? What are you thinking about? What are you worried about? What's going on for you? And if you do this every day, you only have to have one or two of those days a week feel really connecting for that to build up over time. So that at the end of the year, you have connected 50 or 100 times in a meaningful way. Now, the other benefit to the habits is that when we're really busy, like I think a lot of your audience might be entrepreneurs. Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, entrepreneur couples are under so much stress because our businesses try to suck away all of our time and attention. And often it leaves our partners feeling really unseen and unheard, unprioritized. So if you have these moments already on your schedule, on your mind, in your day, your partner knows that they will have your undivided attention for those few minutes every day. And very often that helps them know that they're still a priority, and it takes some of the pressure off of making sure that you have all of those other bigger things happening because they know they have your attention.
Is this reminds me a bit of when you said, it can be little things and depends on who is involved, right? What came to mind is this idea of the love languages, that we have like different love languages, and there's yeah, for someone maybe that gesture of you bring me the coffee, that's the thing that really is meaningful to them. For someone else, it's the hug in the evening and saying goodnight or whatever, right? Is that, yeah, what do you make of that? Does that fit in here?
Absolutely. I think this is why it is so individual. I think couples are supposed to come together in a unique and organic way, and that the relationship is the intersection of two different personalities. Like you're
Mm,
not supposed to become like your spouse. You're supposed to be your own person. And
mm,
so you want some habits that really touch your heart and some that touch your partner's heart. And knowing that love language, what yours is and what your partner's is, means that you can pick the habits that are going to actually mean something to you. So I could give you a
yeah.
list of 30 different habits, and you'd be like, yeah, those aren't ours. Ours
Mm.
are this thing that we do that keeps us connected. And if you do that regularly, that keeps you connected even when other stuff is going on.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's like a thing that you kind of have to discover in your relationship too. And that's part of getting to know where that intersection is, right? If we think about it like that. So with the people you work with, do you generally, how do you go about this? Like, how do you have a process for helping them find these habits and helping them establish these habits?
Yes. Right now, I'm doing one on one coaching with couples, but I have a program that I'm putting together, and I hope by the end of the year I'll run a beta. This is the reason I'm talking with you about this today is because this is straightforward enough that you can think about this and you can then apply it. This is not difficult.
Mm.
It's not complicated. You don't even have to get your partner's buy-in for most of these things. Like you can just decide, you know what? I'm going to start connecting first thing in the morning. I'm just going to say good morning, check in with them. And then over
Yeah.
time, I mean, I just haven't met many partners who are like, you know what? I really don't want to do that with you. Don't say good morning to me. Like, don't be nice to me. Like,
How
it's just
dare
not
you?
the way that works, right? So it's more about thinking intentionally about the habit that you want to have and then trying that out. Now, you may try something and then realize it's not a very good fit for there, or you need to tweak it or do something different. I know I personally have occasionally asked my husband to do something, and we get into a little bit of a power struggle over it. And then eventually maybe he'll try it and I'll be like, oh, that didn't work the way I thought it would. I actually don't like that the way I thought it would. I would. So
Mm.
sometimes you have to go back and say, let's tweak this.
Hmm. Hmm. I think, I mean, something that comes to mind here as well is a problem that I think happens in relationships where you almost have to get back to that point where you can kind of both agree, hey, we're actually in this to build a really good relationship together. And I think it's interesting. Yeah, you can do some things without like needing to get the other person's buy-in, but that's also just something from personal experience that I've noticed. I think that's one of the things early on in a relationship, right, you have all this magic and fireworks and whatnot, and it's like so clear. It's like, oh, we have each other's backs, we want to build each other up, and so on. But that is something that can fade into the background. And yeah, like you said, with entrepreneurship, people are super busy. The importance of that relationship like fades into the background. And I think even just kind of reaffirming to each other, hold on, actually, I want to invest in this. I want to figure out how to make this better. I think even that can kind of go forgotten, even though like when you bring it up, it's like, oh yeah, obviously, yeah, I don't want to give up on this or anything, right? But even just bringing that back to the forefront to be, let's do something deliberately to improve our relationship. I think even that goes lost.
I think that this is why it's easy for me to talk about relationship habits, because it intuitively makes sense. And if you do, let's just say you go home today and you're really inspired and you're like, you know what, all right, I'm going to try these 2 little things. And then you just notice what happens. What usually happens is you have a couple of quick wins and things actually start to feel more in sync. And then either you're encouraged to go further or your partner comes back and is like, what's going on here? And you're like, well, I heard this thing and it sounds really easy and let's just try this. Now, that doesn't solve the other 2 systems. If the other 2 systems are out of whack, you still need to work on those. But those quick wins that you can get often start to bring you into alignment and make you feel better about the relationship and bring that positive energy back to it.
Yeah, I really like that. So yeah, let's get to those other 2 systems. So you talked about, what is it, fixing problems or addressing problems and fixing messes. It's not clear to me what the distinction there is. Can you tell us more about how do you determine whether something is a problem or a mess in a relationship?
Yeah, it's a good observation because there can be a lot of overlap in those 2. I think I tend to think of them as separate, but they also can happen in an intertwined way. So ideally, when a couple works really well together, if either of them has a problem, they bring it up before it becomes a crisis. So then you're bringing it up like, this isn't functioning really well. This isn't going very well, or I don't like how this is happening. Can we talk about how this can happen differently? And so it becomes a very focused conversation on that part of their life that where they don't live really well together. And then they find ways so that they solve that. So a good example from my own life is that early on, my husband and I'll just admit this is simplistic. It's simplistic on purpose. My husband and I could not decide on which toothpaste to use. Now, I know a lot of couples who can spin out over that and just these little tiny details. And so I can't even remember our process at the time, but what we decided is we would each get our own toothpaste because at the end of the year, we've used the same amount of toothpaste and neither one of us had to give on that detail. Now, 20 years later, we have 3 kids. I think we have 5 types of toothpaste in the house. Now, this was a solution that we both were okay with, but it took some working around the fact that we didn't agree on this. We had to like sort out some other options. We could have gotten really entrenched in, this is my solution and you need to accept it, or this is his solution and he's saying I need to accept it. But we had to put that down and be like, okay, how else could we solve this? And that's what we came to. Now, lots of times couples spin out into arguments instead, and that's where the repair piece comes in.
Yeah. So, and obviously, yeah, that makes sense, right? It's like, it is in a way a good example because it's an example of where you don't actually need to compromise, right? Everybody can have what they want. I wonder how often the toothpaste principle applies. But when it comes to, I think this is also something that I've struggled with in my relationship history, let's say, where I've been in relationships and I've been in periods of my life where I would completely lose myself in a relationship, right? Where it's just like I'm so focused on the other person. I have, for me, it was so extreme that when I was asked about what are my needs, I was like, I have no idea what my needs are, right? I'm like so focused on the other person that I've just disappeared somehow. And obviously that's not good. That's like too much compromise. I'm compromising on everything immediately, right? But then
It's so
then I
relatable,
also,
Shane. It's so relatable, mate.
yeah, this is a nice guy thing, right? It's like an extreme nice guy behavior.
Yeah.
And but then I kind of, when I realized how broken this was, I kind of swung the other extreme where I was just like, no, I'm me, right? And I'm just gonna not compromise on anything. And I think for me personally, it was an important experience to like allow myself to say, no, this is what I want. These are my needs. Like, but then that's also not great in a relationship. And so how do we find, like, where's the healthy middle ground, especially when it comes to problems where you do have to somehow compromise?
Well, I think what you just described is really normal and may even be part of the normal life cycle of a couple. That in the
Mm.
beginning, we present our best self, that cleaned up version that looks really easy to live with and easygoing, and that what happens is we settle back into ourselves. Now, if I
Mm.
ask people, they do know that this happens. Like this is what everybody expects. What you see on that first date in those first months is not really that true self yet.
Mhm.
Um, I do think if you can be your true self in the beginning of the relationship, you have a much better chance of having that really solid relationship without having a lot of turmoil as you work through those things. So the challenge really is in the extremes.
Mhm.
You guys are supposed to come together as allies on each other's side. So if you realize that you've given too much of yourself, if this partner is really your ally, you'd be able to say, "Hey, I went too far. I was like bowled over by you and I wanted you to know how much you meant to me. And so I think I need to dial this back some, but I want to stay out of those power struggles. I don't want you to think that I am somebody different than who I really am. I don't want to, like, that's who I am at the beginning of the relationship, but now I want you to know the rest of me too."
Mm.
Okay. So that's kind of a best case scenario. Now, obviously, that's not what typically happens. What typically happens is you you put something out there as a need, and then you have to live with however your partner accepts that need. And then you have to do cleanup around when that doesn't happen well. But most of us are not very good at knowing what we need and then asking for what we need. Instead, it comes out like, "Why are you doing this to me?" Well,
Mhm.
wait a minute. This was me, this was you, and now we need to readjust and figure out how we get on that path that allows us both to live well in this relationship. So I think that that is a little bit of a bumpy road, but it's also supposed to be bumpy. Like you're wearing off each other's rough edges and the places that you don't fit together perfectly. But we're not trying to make you different people. We're trying to let you be who you are and live well with your partner.
Yeah, it's communication, right? If you, the way you laid it out, right? If you can actually have that level of self-awareness where you can say, here's what's actually going on. And like you say, in this example, where it's like, okay, I've been neglecting my own needs, and I have to adjust, and you can communicate that clearly. That also takes the danger out of it, right? It doesn't, because otherwise your partner's behavior changing in some way can feel like a threat. And if you can clearly communicate, it takes that out of it. But I guess the question is, why is that so hard to do? Because in practice, like maybe we can look back and say, well, I wish I had communicated like that, but I didn't. Why is it so hard to do this?
It's so difficult. It's so difficult. Sorry, it just like it's something I relate to so much, especially what you said, Shane. It's like this like sort of enmeshing thing where you sort of melt into the other person really, and the communication of like the direct communication of your own sort of needs and desires and stuff. That's something I've had to learn, and it's still very, very difficult. And yeah, it's like if you don't do that, like historically, what I would do is sort of communicate in indirect ways without actually asking for what I need or asking for what, because it's like a vulnerability thing. It's like if I don't actually ask for it directly, then I can't get rejected directly. So that's safer. But so it's almost like an indirect way of it. And it's like, and then if it's a no, it's like, oh, well, I didn't really, it can like sugarcoat the blow really. But yeah, I agree with you. It's like the communication thing, man. It's the hard thing to learn as well. But it's simple, right? It's simple but difficult for me, at least.
Let's take some of the pressure off of that, okay? You don't have to handle this well in the moment. You can get out of the situation, take some time and reflect, and come back and say, all right, I think this is what I was trying to say, or this was at the heart of what I was really asking for, and I was worried about asking that because I thought you might say no. Okay. Now, I think that a lot of people want conversations to be one and done. This is not a very realistic expectation. Most problems are not one and done conversations. They are a conversation that you have, you get as far as you can, you put that conversation down. In between, you think about it, you process it, you maybe do some research, you figure out what you really need. You pick up that conversation again. You then work as far as you can, you put that down, and again, you're thinking and processing, and you do that as long as it takes to get through a problem. You're not supposed to sit down and like plow through and hit every issue and every point of it and every perspective and come out, half an hour later and be like, look, we just did it. I mean, maybe you can do that with some stuff, but that's not really the way communication works.
Got you.
Yeah. I think that's really good. As you were talking, I just realized that I kind of just realized how often I've done exactly that, where I feel like almost like I'm trying to find the right moment to have this one conversation to figure everything out, and like you said, that puts so much pressure on it. It doesn't help. So that definitely, I just kind of clicked for me that's definitely a bad habit I've had. Yeah.
All right. So I will tell you, if I'm talking a little bit stereotypically, now this is not across the board because stereotypes never fit everybody. If you brought a topic back up to your partner, they would be bowled over and so impressed with your level of engagement because stereotypically men want to have one conversation and then not talk about it again. And having an argument is a sign that there's a conversation that didn't get had. So an argument actually means you didn't have the conversation. You need to go back and bring that up and try that again. So
that checks out for me. It's like I'll have a conversation, and then if there isn't some like kind of tidy resolution and clear takeaways and action points, and we've resolved this, we've really got far, we can put that to bed, it's kind of uncomfortable. It's like, oh no, that's unresolved.
Well, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. You're figuring out how to live well with someone. The idea is to stay engaged through that yuckiness so that you actually can get to good solutions and good ways of living together.
Yeah. So let's get into the third point about fixing messes, or is that, I'm not sure if that's how you said it. So a mess would be like when there has been some kind of a fallout. This is like what we do after we've had a shouting match or something like that.
So there are multiple ways of making repairs. So a repair is a good idea anytime there's been a relationship injury. Now, a relationship injury can range all the way from just not noticing something, all the way up to doing something that really lets your partner down and makes them feel really disappointed. Now, the more of these things that you repair, the better your relationship is going to be, because you're not carrying all this baggage. Now, a repair can be as simple. The most straightforward repair that people think about is an apology. That's Now, I have to say a good apology, because in general, people suck at apologies. They're terrible at apologies. And the apology can sometimes be as bad as the thing that they're apologizing for. And then you're arguing over the apology rather than the thing that happened. But that's the repair that most people think about when they think about repairs.
Sorry, Cheri, I just want to briefly stop on that for a moment. What would an example of a bad apology be? Just so we can avoid it, hopefully.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that this happened, but here's all the reasons why it's your fault.
Yeah, I can see how that would land poorly.
Or a blanket, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, it really leaves the other person puzzled and confused. Or they fill in the blank on their own. They'll say, oh, you're sorry. Okay, you're sorry for the thing that I think you should be sorry for. And when people say, I'm sorry, without any context or any accountability for what it is they're sorry for, often it comes across as just trying to shut down the conversation, shut down the communication. It doesn't move that forward in any way.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that a tricky thing, with what you said, I'm sorry, but here's all the reasons I'm right. I guess the tricky thing is to not be defensive, because it makes sense that I don't want to be seen as a bad person. And so it's like, okay, I apologize, but then I also justify my behavior because what I'm really saying is I'm not a bad person, right?
I think what you're really
not work.
saying is, I also want you to say you're sorry. I'm sorry, but what I really want is you to also say that you're sorry, and then we'll feel on even footing, because an apology is a very vulnerable thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's also something, I guess, we have to be able to be vulnerable in each other's presence for this to work.
Well, otherwise, what's the point?
I've just got to say, I love this apology topic, and just something that springs to mind now is, so I've got a little brother, and he's like 9, and ever since he was young, I thought it'd be a really cool, I didn't necessarily premeditate this and then do it. It was more just like something I did and then thought, you know what, actually I want to cultivate this. It's if he gets upset over something I've done, or some way in which I disappointed him, or something, or some way that I was playing with him and I upset him or something, is to apologize to him well. It's like, if he, ever since he was maybe 4 or 5, and he started getting offended by everything, all of a sudden he started to develop this sense of self, and started feeling offended by stuff and whatnot. It was amazing to watch. But then just apologizing to him when I'd messed up, because that kind of teaches him. It kind of teaches humility, and it's teaching that I am also accepting that I can be wrong, even though I'm technically a grown-up, allegedly. And it just felt like, in the moment when I would do that, it felt like a deeply respectful thing to do for him. And it teaches, as I say, the vulnerability thing. It's it's okay to admit that you screwed up. It's okay to admit. It's also okay to be vulnerable. So I just think a well done apology. I've done some bad apologies in my time when there was a dodgy intention behind it, or if I wasn't really sorry but was just saying sorry just to make the person be quiet. But when a real good apology where I really did actually feel apologetic for something, that can, yeah, that's the first, that's kind of the only relationship repair thing I can think of. So I'm curious. I'm curious of other types.
Yeah, there's a lot of different repairs, and some of them won't even sound like repairs. So knowing what actually makes a repair in your relationship matters. That's why kind of that system has to work. You have to figure out what those things are. All right. Other repairs are taking accountability or changing your behavior or showing up for your partner or intentionally doing something nice for them above and beyond the regular things that you would do for them. Um, a repair might be listening or acknowledging what they said. Um, I have probably a list of 30 or 40 different things that I have accumulated over the years of what can be repairs. Now, when you think about the love languages, that also comes into play here because we each have specific things that make us feel like that relationship is restored. And so you are looking for that thing that lets your partner like let their physiology relax, lets them feel connected to you again. And sometimes that might be doing something that is unique to them because that's what matters. A hug can be a repair for someone who needs that physical touch. Doing something extra special, like doing an extra chore, might be something for a person who acts of service is important. Bringing them home a candy bar might be something that would be important for someone who is a gift giver. So, really thinking about who they are and what makes them feel better about the relationship. And then, of course, you want the things that make you feel better about the relationship as well.
Mhm. Another thing I would like to ask you about, which relates a bit to what Ollie was saying before, and I'm fully aware that this is not, I don't expect you to have a solution to this, but I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on this, which is about role models. So one of my beliefs is that that humans mainly learn through role modeling, and we do a lot of theater around all kinds of other things, right? Where we talk a lot and so on, but mainly we learn by imitating other people. And with relationships, I think that that most of us lack good role models. If I think about all the relationships that I know, and that I kind of had, that I encountered growing up, it's quite a lot more common to see strained relationships, difficult relationships. This friend's parents broke up, this friend's parents got a divorce, that kind of thing. It's kind of more common than to see a couple where you're like, oh, this is just working. This is a great relationship. This is something I can model. And also in the media, my experience, like from my perspective growing up, the kinds of movies and so on that I saw did a terrible job of role modeling relationship related things. In my generation, like all the romance in the kind of media that I saw was usually like the guy is basically stalking the girl until he gets her, and then when he gets her, then it's over, right? That's the end of the movie. And so it's just like both from the media and from real life, there was a real drought of good role models. And I wonder, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And is there anything that we can do in order to find better examples to model?
Yeah, this is a real problem because media does not do a good job of highlighting good relationships.
Mhm.
And bad relationships are going to stand out in our minds more strongly than good relationships. What I find, there are people who really don't have people around them who have good relationships. What I find is we don't even notice the ones who do have good relationships because they're not complaining about their spouse. You're not They're not
Mm.
telling you stories about the crises that they went through. So often if you can kind of look at who's standing in the background, then you realize that there are these people who have really good relationships. Now, a really good relationship doesn't mean that they never have a crisis, and it doesn't mean that they are always in sync. It just means that they have ways of working through the messiness when it happens. And they take that as an opportunity to grow together rather than letting that turn them against each other. So even in movies and shows, there are some good examples of good relationships. But again, that doesn't make very good TV. So there's got to be something else that pulls everyone's attention to that show if they have a really solid marital relationship or couple relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. So in that sense, the good relationship is the dog that doesn't bark, right? You have to listen for the dog that doesn't bark in that sense. But I do think that's actionable. You can look for the relationships that are not making waves in your family, in your social circle, and so on. That's an interesting indicator. Yeah, yeah, that's great. So let's see if there's. I mean, I feel like we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot, and I think it's great that we've gone through 3 tools that people can go ahead and try out and actually implement. So, as a final question, what I would like to ask, like, is there anything that I didn't ask you yet that I should have? Is there any other topic or anything else that you encounter a lot in your work with couples that hasn't come up yet, but that you want to share with our audience?
Well, I think one of the things that I would like you guys to hear is that these little things actually matter. I think that we wait for these mountaintop moments, that big vacation where we can connect, or that perfect date where everything just goes like exactly the way you plan it. And we de emphasize these smaller moments where we can show up for each other and really know who our partner is and be known by our partner. And that it is much easier to plan something that happens every day, just a small thing. We're not talking about a huge commitment of time, but these small ways that you show up for each other, those have such a cumulative effect that then when the crises happen, your partner has a lot of goodwill and they feel like they know you and you know them. And so those crises don't feel like they are going to just destroy everything in one fell swoop. So just really emphasizing that day to day stuff. My best friend got married years ago, and I remember her telling me, I didn't realize that true love was that my husband would fill up the Brita filter. And uh, and that's just mind blowing because isn't that what true love is? It's like those little things that you do for each other that make the other person's life better. And sometimes they go unnoticed, but cumulatively, it's this feeling of you've got my back, you're there for me, and we are going to build this life in a way that feels good for both of us.
Mm. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that with us. So, where should people go? I'm sure there's lots of people listening who are like, I need more of this. Where should they go to be able to follow you and learn more from you?
So there are two places you can find me. You can find me in lots of places, but the two places where I spend most of my time, um, if you go to my website, it's cheritimko.com. That's where you can find all of the ways to connect with me. I have this project I'm working on that I'm really excited about. I started a Facebook community. It's called Date Night Community, and it is to encourage couples to spend some time together each week. Now, when we think of date night, we think of spending some time leaving the house, going on a date. But I'm trying to have people also think of this is just spending a half an hour once a week where you sit down and talk to each other, or you do a chore together and actually talk to each other while you do it. So just extending that date night to think of how do we intentionally spend some time together, whatever that looks like. Um, so that's a place that I'm really excited about that and really want to see that become more of a movement of people who are all encouraging each other to spend some time with their partner.
Nice. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's great. So we will also put the links to this in the show notes. So for anyone listening, you can tap on the thing if you're on your phone and you'll see the links to the show notes. And all the links are going to be in there as well. So with that, thank you very much for your time and thank you for all the wisdom you shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys asked such great questions.
Thank you, Cheri.
All right. So that was Cheri Timko. That was really cool. I really liked that conversation.
Now, everyone listening to that episode, they're gonna go off and just have the most craziest relationships, have the most amazing, deep relationships. I think we've really helped people out with that. And we take all the credit, of course. If you have a good relationship,
Yes.
then you know who was responsible for that and solely responsible.
Absolutely, yeah. If your significant other is like, oh, you've changed. What's happening? Send them to the Ikario podcast. You're obliged. You're obliged
Shane and Ollie.
To promote our podcast in return for the life-changing effects you're getting here. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, I think that was really good, and it was, it's like practical, right? I like this idea that. The little things matter, and it's these little things that you can do. And even, the whole premise of do this stuff before you find yourself in this relationship where you resent each other and you have all this, before like the pot boils over, essentially. I think that's such a key thing. And I just see so many parallels to other areas of life as well, where even with something like, like she mentioned, okay, do the habits like consistently, even on bad days, essentially. Like how much is that the same as with so many other things? Like, you do something like a gratitude practice. Well, if you only do your gratitude writing on days where you feel good, then because you're not, like, the less you do it, the less good you feel, the less you do the gratitude practice, right? It gets worse and worse, essentially. And so you have to do it. Like she said, the days where you don't feel like it, those are the most important days, right? So, I feel like a lot of this is like wisdom for relationships and wisdom for life at the same time.
For sure. Like, don't just do the thing when you feel like it. Do the thing if it coincides with something that's important to you. Like, if you want a great relationship, you can't just depend upon doing the stuff that shows appreciation when you're feeling appreciative, because then you're at the you're at the mercy of the feeling then that comes and goes.
Exactly. Yeah. So I thought it was great. And for me, a lot of stuff comes up where I'm like, oh yeah, I can immediately see how I'm going to, practice what we talked about here. So it's really good. And of course, we'd love to know any comments, questions on this. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment or leave a question. If you're listening to this elsewhere, you can also go to the show notes link and leave a comment there. And you can also go to anchor.fm/ikario. There's a message button there. You click that button or tap that button, you can record a voice message. And every once in a while, we answer some of these voice messages on the show as well. So those are some ways in which you can get in touch. And of course, you can also like review this. I think reviewing it on Apple Podcasts helps maybe more people find it. So if you like this show or you want to support what we do, maybe you've noticed we have no sponsors. We're not reading stuff about mattresses and underwear and God knows what the current crop of Manscaped. We're not interrupting our program with ad reads. If you support what we do, then one of the things you can do to help us out is leave a review, let other people know, maybe share this with someone who you think could benefit from this podcast. And we appreciate that greatly.
Indeed we do. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.
Yeah, see you next time.